Hi, everyone, and welcome to our latest podcast. So, the headline for this podcast today is: Do you want to know why the UAE has become one of the most popular places to live, work, buy property, or set up a company? Then this podcast is, I think, going to be very interesting for you. And I'm delighted today to welcome a friend of mine and someone we've worked with for 2 or 3 years. His name is Calum Mclatchie, and he works with Creative Zone, which is one of the largest companies in the UAE and also actually in the Gulf for helping people to set up and establish businesses there. So a little bit about Calum. He's been in the UAE for 7 years. And like many people, he came to the UAE looking for opportunities to work in a dynamic and growing economy. And Callum's strengths are that he's been working in this business for 7 years, helping companies set up. And he also has a very good understanding and knowledge of the local market, whether it be the legislation with regard to business and law, and basically how business is changing in the UAE and why it's become so popular. So, Callum, thank you for putting time aside today and welcome to our podcast. And yeah, how's things with you? And if you can perhaps tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, James. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thank you very much for inviting me on. So I have been in the UAE for 7 years. I'm one of the business team managers here at Creative Zone. I've been working in the industry for business setup since I moved over to the UAE. I'm originally from the UK. My family heritage is Scottish, but I was born and raised in England. And exactly as James mentioned, after my sort of graduation, I saw a great opportunity to move to Dubai for the opportunities for young professionals, and just the general lifestyle of living, and to get away from the UK as well. So it's just that overall quality standard of living and opportunities to move over to UAE and Dubai.
Okay, great. Well, look, thanks for that. And I think we caught up actually during COVID, didn't we, when you helped me to set up my company there in the UAE. And I think it's fair to say that, during COVID and subsequently, the UAE has really boomed and attracted even more people. So it's probably grown faster in the last few years that you've been there than it was growing before COVID. Would you like to sort of highlight and discuss what are perhaps the main reasons for this?
Yeah, of course. So obviously seeing the changes pre and post COVID in the UAE, I think the main factor which helped the UAE and the economy boom post COVID was how they actually dealt with COVID and handled it. There was quite severe and strict restrictions during the pandemic itself. So you weren't allowed to leave your home. You had to apply for permits to the police to go for standard things like food, or to get cash, or to get medicine. So you weren't allowed to leave your home other than for these reasons, and you had to apply for permits. So these sort of severe restrictions actually UAE overcome the pandemic much quicker than the rest of the world. The heavy restrictions allowed the economy to open up much faster. I think the UAE had one of the highest vaccination rates globally as well. So they actually give free vaccinations across the whole of the country, and one of the quickest countries to achieve the highest percentage of vaccinations globally as well. So all of these contributing factors help the UAE and the economy overcome the pandemic much sooner than the rest of the world, leading to the boom in the economy. And there was a huge influx post-COVID of foreign nationals moving here, investments, because everything was open relatively quickly after COVID, because of the way that the government actually handled the restrictions during COVID as well. So these harsh lockdowns helped the country boom relatively quickly afterwards.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what you said because I mean I traveled a little bit during COVID, and interestingly enough, I started COVID in Singapore, and I think in the early days of the UAE, it probably aspired to be similar to a Singapore, but I think as you've highlighted, the way the government was able to handle COVID during that time has probably brought it on a par or even above in terms of a location to live than maybe even Singapore or Hong Kong. And in terms of, obviously you have to do a lot of work with the UAE government, when you're helping people set up companies. How do you find working with the government, in terms of their organization, their electronic processes, compared to, say, other places that you've been, like the UK? Because clearly, I mean, as we know, the UAE was formed in 1971, and when I first got there in the 80s and 90s, the government was still quite bureaucratic and difficult to get things done. But my understanding, and obviously you'll have a better handle on this than myself, is that it's become much more efficient, and a lot of the government processes now can be done electronically. Is that a fair comment? And how do you find it when you're dealing with helping people?
Yeah, absolutely. So UAE in itself, I believe, is a very forward-thinking, innovative country. So we are seeing a lot of the government entities go sort of paperless, go electronic. So all of the licenses and corporate and constitutional documentation, a lot of them will be e-documents now. So a lot of it will be paperless. So they are forward-thinking. They're very adaptive, and that's why we're kind of here in the middle as well. So what we do at Creative Zone and as a business, we keep it a little bit more personable, and liaise directly between the government, because it can still be a sort of standard customer service, going and get a ticket and being a number and just going to visit the customer service at the government entities can be a bit tedious still, although they are very adaptive and have all these advancements in terms of documents and paperless technology. That's why we're kind of here to remove those the tedious processes on behalf of you as well.
Okay. And obviously, as you say, that definitely makes a difference for people who are looking to move and live there. And personally, I can see this, when I come through the airport, once you've got your visa or Emirates ID card, it must be probably one of the easiest countries in the world now to enter and exit without, having to stand in long queues. So even though it's one of the busiest airports in the world, it's probably still one of the most efficient. But obviously, apart from the business aspects of the UAE and Dubai in particular, what are the attractions with regard to lifestyles for individuals or families that also have attracted people to the UAE? And if you could also sort of comment as well from a security perspective, how does the UAE compare, would you say, with other countries in Europe or other parts of the world, for people who are looking for, security and not being worried about their family? So, I mean, I'm guessing, you obviously come into contact with a lot of people, and I'm sure people discuss these sort of aspects of life in the UAE with you probably all the time.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, first and foremost, the UAE itself is such a diverse, multicultural, with several different cultures, religions, nationalities. There's seven emirates within the UAE. If you're not familiar with the UAE, you have Dubai, of course, which is the sort of main commercial emirate of the UAE, probably the most internationally recognized location. Then you have the capital, Abu Dhabi, as well. And then you have the Northern Emirates, Ajman, Fujairah, Ras Al Khaimah, etc. So, what attracts the actual sort of clients to come and people to move to UAE is the lifestyle itself. So the fact that it's one of the safest countries in the world, has one of the lowest crime rates. I mean, not to mention the fantastic weather that they constantly have year round. There's the permanently sunshine in the UAE, so the weather is absolutely amazing. During the summer months, it does get very hot. So it can go to temperatures above 40, 50 degrees sometimes. So the summer months, occasionally a little bit less pleasurable than the other months, but generally speaking, the weather is fantastic all year round. You have amazing facilities, infrastructure in Dubai as well, which attracts people to live in the UAE. You literally have everything you want on your doorstep, from every single restaurant and cuisines, international cuisines globally as well. You have amazing facilities, any type of activities you want to do. If you want to go hiking in the mountains, if you want to go and join your local football team or sports teams or running clubs, you can do these. You have amazing restaurants, bars, nightclubs. So all of the sort of the tourism itself as well is amazing to come and live here. You have several different sort of world-class educational systems as well, through schools with different languages, different curriculums, depending on where you're from globally as well. So the educational side of things is amazing for your children and upbringing for your family as well. So it's just never ending, the benefits to come and live in the UAE. And I can see why so many people move here for all these different attractions and just the typical lifestyle as well, not to mention the tax-free benefits also, which of course is a huge factor. And we can get into more details in terms of business structuring and taxation in that side as well. But there is 0% personal income tax in the UAE. So every penny you earn is not taxed at all, or every dirham, shall I say.
Thanks for that, Callum. And I guess also other people are always interested in tax and stuff like that. And there's, always talk about corporation tax in the UAE, and there were a few changes last year in this regard. I mean, as you've highlighted, there is no personal income tax in the UAE, and there's no talk about that either. But perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the changing landscape for corporate tax in the UAE.
Yeah, of course. So ever since the existence of UAE, there has been no corporate tax, but the Federal Tax Authority and the government authorities have implemented new legislation for corporate tax. So as of 1st of June 2023, there's new tax brackets which have been implemented. So there's effectively two tax brackets. Any income and profits below 100,000 US dollars is always going to be 0% corporate tax. So if you're not generating profits up to 100,000 or above 100,000 US dollars annually, then you don't have to worry about corporate tax whatsoever. Corporate tax is only implemented above that initial 100,000 US dollars, and it'll be charged by 9% on net profits above and beyond that 100,000 US dollars. Now, there are multiple different jurisdictions to register a company in the UAE. You have what's called a mainland registration, which is issued by the Department of Economic Development, the DED. And then you have multiple different free zone jurisdictions as well. As per our understanding from the Federal Tax Authority, it is mandatory for all companies to register for what's called a TIN number, a tax identification number. This is irrelevant if you surpass the threshold of that 100,000 US dollars. You must register for a TIN number. Now, from the recent announcements as well, it's our understanding that if you're generating any revenue and profits from the local UAE market, then you'll fall within these tax brackets as well. That's if you are a free zone or a mainland company. Now, the questions are, there are certain exemptions to not pay or mitigate any tax, and this will depend on the type of business you are. And we're yet to see if a free zone company generating all of its income outside the UAE will be liable to pay these taxes as well. From the recent announcements, we believe it might be a case that they will have to still pay tax if you cross these thresholds. But it's all relatively new legislation, so we still need to see how it's fully implemented. But just to be safe, I would make sure that it's mandatory for everyone to register for corporate tax and to take into consideration these thresholds as well, until we see how the Federal Tax Authority will implement everything fully in the coming years.
Okay, well, look, thanks for the update on that. I mean, I guess just to clarify for our listeners, as it were, is that at the moment, as you say, if you set up an offshore company, um, there is a chance that you might have to pay tax if you generate over 100,000 in net profit. Is that correct?
Correct. There is a chance. Now, there are certain exemptions. There are things and initiatives that the government are implementing, such as something called an SME relief, where you can actually generate up to 3 million dirhams revenue for the first 3 years. So from 2023 up to 2026, you can have SME relief and not pay any corporate tax as well. So there are initiatives to avoid this and exceptions. But as I mentioned, as per our understanding, yes, the taxation is applicable to all jurisdictions, irrelevant if you're a free zone or a mainland, until we're
Okay.
yet to see any further news.
Okay, but I guess just to highlight though that the maximum tax that you would pay is 9% on any profit that you make. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that's only above the initial 100,000 US dollars. So it's 9% on net profits above 100,000 US dollars. And
Okay,
let's say, for example, if you registered a company today, you have 9 months after your first fiscal year to be fully compliant with the tax legislation. So if you're registering your business now, today, your first financial year will be 2024. So you have 9 months, you have until September 2025 to be fully compliant with the new tax legislation.
Okay, and I mean, I think, this shows progress really on behalf of the UAE, because we all know that, it's pretty much impossible now to live in an entirely tax-free world. And clearly the UAE wants to be part of the global marketplaces. So these changes are really, I'm sure, designed to strengthen its place in the international market and encourage it as a place for business. And, when we look at it, the competitors, like your Hong Kongs, your Singapores, your offshore islands in the Channel Islands, still the UAE is probably better value for money than most of these locations when it comes to paying tax. So I think it's important that we keep things in perspective. Because I think, as you and I have discussed, that more and more people, who perhaps do business in less secure environments than the UAE, are looking to set up, a structure in the UAE or a holding company, which is probably offshore, not necessarily just to minimize tax, but also to protect their interests, that they might have in other countries. So, I know you and I have been dealing with a lot of businesses that are based in Asia, and they've been keen to, set up a branch in the UAE, so that they can move certain of their assets and profits to the UAE to protect the key shareholders and business owners in case anything goes wrong in the market that they're working. And I think this is really just a form of insurance, and this is what other islands used to do before, whether it was the BVI or Singapore or other places. So I think this is a natural um, progression, for the UAE, as it were. But I mean, obviously, you've been there for 7 years. I mean, I first moved to the UAE in 1983, and the landscape was very different then. And you're probably aware that in the early days, that if you set up a business in the UAE, you had to have a local Emirati partner who would be the 51% owner of the business. So, you know, when you look at the business environment today, and obviously you're involved in helping setting up companies, I mean, what do you think about how the UAE has progressed since 1971, which actually isn't that long ago when you compare it with other companies? And in terms of how would you reassure people who are looking to move to the UAE or set up businesses, that the passage that the UAE is taking, I would say looks very positive, for business owners, because the UAE continues to sort of reinvent itself and introduce better laws to make it the place that it is for people to live and work and set up business.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, even in my time in the UAE and Dubai, I've seen drastic changes over the last 7 years, never mind from the 1970s. So as you mentioned, traditionally, you used to have a local Emirati sponsor on your company who on paper owned 51% of the business, although they might not necessarily get any profits or remuneration from that business itself. There would be kind of a nominee sponsor, and you would pay them an annual sponsorship fee directly to that local Emirati. However, in 2022, again, legislation changed and regulations changed from the government authorities, whereby you did not need to have a local Emirati sponsor for a mainland registration anymore. So they actually implemented the majority of the activities, probably 95% of the activities can be 100% foreign owned for mainland companies. It was always the case for free zone jurisdictions. You could have 100% foreign ownership. But the significant changes were with the mainland, and you could have 100% foreign ownership for almost all of the activities. And as you previously mentioned, the corporate tax, I believe as well, is to create the UAE as a sort of global economic commercial hub as well. Yes, people might see it as a taxation, but they're trying to improve their overall view and their overall sort of how they're internationally recognized in terms of banking as well, compliance checks. They're implementing lots of anti-money laundering systems, economic substance requirements where you need physical presence for certain activities. So they're always improving their regulations and to improve their sort of standpoint globally as well to attract foreign investments as well.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I think those are good points. And something else that I know that you and your company that's is involved in, which has been sort of big news over the last few years, is these new visas that the UAE has created for different types of people to encourage people to move, locate, retire, whatever it might be, to the UAE. Can you chat a little bit about these visas, like the golden visa and the retirement visa, and how they work, and how you also see that they've changed, the way of life in the UAE and the way people think about the UAE in terms of, as I said, in the 80s and 90s, people would come for 2 or 3 or 4 years on a short-term contract, to build something or, work on an oil platform or whatever. But these visas, I think, mark a substantial change in attitude, from the government of the UAE to, encouraging people to perhaps stay longer term. Can you just sort of expand on that, as it were?
Yeah, absolutely. So the main way to get a residency visa in the UAE is to be sponsored by a company. So by law, it's mandatory for the company who sponsors you in the UAE to provide medical insurance, to pay for your residency visa and Emirates ID once you've accepted an offer letter from your sponsor or your employer. So that's the sort of traditional route. And this visa, for example, like under Creative Zone, I'm on an employment visa, and that's valid for 2 years. So the all sort of standard visas through employment are for 2 years. The other option to apply for a residency visa would be to become an investor or shareholder or partner in a company. So you could go to one of the free zone jurisdictions, or you could go to the mainland Department of Economic Development and you could register a trade license. And then you could apply for your residency visa under your company as a shareholder, as a partner under the company if there's multiple shareholders, or you could even go for an employment visa if you wanted to do so as well. And again, this visa is valid for 2 years. You'll have your standard residency visa, which allows you to live and work inside the UAE. You can travel through the airport as many times as you want. You'll have a Emirates ID, which is the national identification card as well, all provided under this. Now, the more recent sort of attractions for the residency visas would be what's called a golden visa, which is becoming a very popular option. There are two main ways to apply for a golden visa. First of all is through employment. So again, you could have a sponsorship through your employer, or you could have your own employment under your own registered company. Now, to apply for the golden visa, which is a 10-year residency visa, you would need to have a monthly salary of 30,000 dirhams. You need to have an attested qualification as well, attested in the home country where it was issued, and then further attested by Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in the UAE. And you need that 6 month salary before you can apply for that golden visa. The second option to apply for the golden visa would be investment through property. So as long as you invest in a property and you have 2 million equity, so no mortgage on that property of at least 2 million, you can apply for a golden visa. Again, that can be a 5 or a 10-year visa through property. So there's lots of different initiatives that the government are trying to keep foreign expatriates here long term, because you have to renew your visa annually. You'd have to go for a medical examination, which is standard procedure for your residency visa. You go and take your blood test, you'll have an x-ray, etc. So it's just initiatives to try and keep the most talented foreign expatriates here long term, to live and bring your family here as well. If you have a 10-year golden visa, you can sponsor your dependents, so your spouse and your children, for the same duration as well. So all these initiatives are trying to keep the foreign expatriates here long term, to obviously help and boom the economy as well.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, they're quite clever the way they target the more high net worth market, as it were. And just because you go for a golden visa doesn't necessarily mean you've got to live there for 365 days of the year like you would have to in certain countries in Europe. You're pretty much free to move around as you want. So, if you want to go and spend 3 months of the year in Spain and 4 months in Australia, do business. And from a personal income tax point of view, as you say, there's no tax to pay in the UAE, so you can be quite creative about these sort of golden visas, depending on your overall situation with regard to business and income. And I'm sure they will obviously probably continue to develop these visas and encourage more people, because at the end of the day that it would appear that their ambition is to grow the market and to continue to build the UAE up in terms of infrastructure and attract the kind of talent that they want, as it were. So, Callum, as we move on, can you tell us a little bit perhaps about Creative Zone, about the background of Creative Zone as a company, and specifically, how you help either individuals or businesses relocate to the UAE, and what your involvement is in this sort of process, as it were?
Yes, of course. So I work for a company called Creative Zone. We're one of the leading business setup corporate service providers in the UAE. We were established in 2010. So I've been operating for a little over 13, 14, almost 14 years now. So what we do, we work directly with multiple different government jurisdictions. So as we've mentioned briefly and touched upon, there's two main types of setup you can do in the UAE. You have a mainland registration, which is issued by the Department of Economic Development. And then you have multiple different free zone jurisdictions. There's over 50 different free zones across the 7 Emirates. So we will help, we'll sit down with you, we'll discuss your business requirements, and we will help decide and dictate and recommend and advise you on the best solution and business setup for your business. Whether it's a mainland, whether it's a free zone registration would be more suitable for you, because these two type of registrations and jurisdictions have different regulations. So a mainland license is kind of the more official license, if you will. You're free to work directly inside the UAE local markets. You can do B2B, B2C. You can work with government entities, which is one of the major differences between the two. You can rent commercial spaces. So you can get what's called an ajari in the UAE, which is an Arabic word for tenancy contract or tenancy agreement. So you can rent your own office space or warehouse space anywhere in the mainland or the local market, which is the main advantages to a mainland DED license. The second option would be free zone jurisdictions. Typically, They are for working internationally, so outside the UAE, or within the free zone jurisdiction itself, or with any other free zone jurisdiction across the UAE. The restrictions come when you're working inside the local UAE market from a free zone. Now, there's different types of activities. You have commercial or trading, you have services, you have media, etc. So depending on what type of service you're offering to your clients will dictate the sort of regulations inside the local market. For example, if you're a trading company and you want to trade inside the local UAE market, you must hire a local distributor or a local courier service to deliver the goods. You cannot deliver from a free zone jurisdiction directly into the local market yourself, or you should not. So you'll need to use a local distribution service. So that will be the major difference between the two. And what we do at Creative Zone, we, as I mentioned, advise you and guide you to the best solution for your business. So we'll help issue all the necessary corporate documents from the government authority, all the constitutional documentation, which tends to be a trade license, a memorandum of association or articles of association. You'll typically get an occupancy agreement or a virtual Ajari registration. So you'll be given these documents for opening corporate bank accounts. Then we can help with your residency visa. So whether this is for you as a shareholder or partner under the company, or your staff, so if you're hiring staff, or even your dependents, so your spouse and children, we can help with your visas. We'll guide you through that whole process as well. It is worth noting that typically physical presence is required for the residency visa process, and you should stay in the UAE for the duration of this process as well. Then we can help with finally the banking. Now, banking can be the most sort of complicated or tedious part of the company structure itself, but we can help you with this side of things. We have a fantastic banking department at Creative Zone with great connections with the local banks. So we will guide you through and recommend and advise you on the best solutions for your business as well. And then above and beyond just the sort of company setup itself, at Creative Zone, you'll always have a dedicated account manager. So you'll always have a main point of contact. So for any amendments, upgrades, downgrades, anything to do with your business license, we can assist you with that as well. And we just remove the headache of the unnecessary administrative works that you might have to do if you went directly to the government jurisdictions yourself and going through that sort of customer service, having a number, etc. Here, it's a little bit more personable. You'll be speaking directly with your account managers. And then above and beyond just the sort of company setup and the bank account opening, we have tax and accounting departments. So we have experts to help you with your bookkeeping and accounting and to be fully compliant with the new tax legislation. So we can help you with those side of things. Then lots of additional benefits. We have a co-working space in our downtown office, which you can come and use for an allocated amount of time per month as well. So we're really a full turnkey service, a corporate service provider for business setup. And we'll be there throughout the duration and existence of your company as well. So if you do need any assistance, then we're here to help.
Okay, I mean that sounds fantastic. So I mean, I guess just summarizing up. So really, you are a one-stop shop for anyone who's looking for advice or information or help in setting up in the UAE. And not only that, basically, even once you've helped them with the setup, you're there as an ongoing partner in their business, whether they have issues with regard to tax or, legal issues or changing the company or hiring new employees. Basically you've got the skills and knowledge and experience within yourself and Creative Zone, to be that point of contact for, people, as they journey to setting up a business and hopefully, being successful in the UAE. So, yeah, I mean, that sounds fantastic, as it were. Calum, perhaps we could end the podcast by talking a little bit about the UAE. I mean, obviously, as you've seen and I've seen myself, as the UAE strengthens itself both as a tourist and a business destination and a place to live and work, going forward, what do you think are the challenges the UAE can, faces that it can continue to develop in the way it has. I mean, obviously, at the moment, the world is a very volatile place. And 2023 was a very sad year in many instances. And you know, when we look at the UAE, in some ways, actually, it's probably benefited from the volatility in certain parts of the world, because people see the UAE as a safe haven, really, and they seem to be more keen to buy property or set up business there during these times. But how do you see, from what you're hearing in Creative Zone and on the ground in the UAE, what plans do you think the UAE has for the next 10 years to continue to grow and encourage and help people to come there?
Yeah, so I mean, UAE has its own issues like anywhere else in the world. I know that there's a lot of problems with inflation globally, supply chains, etc. So I mean, UAE has a geographical advantage in terms of where its location globally as well. I mean, it's very close to Africa, very close to Asia, Southeast Asia, a short flight away from Europe. So its geographical position is always going to be a huge advantage in that sense. I mean, the challenges that we might see is, of course, we've discussed the new tax implications. So we're yet to see how that might affect any sort of potential investments from foreign expatriates or foreign corporate companies. So we'll see how that is going to be fully implemented. Although I don't think personally it's going to affect the economy or foreign investment too much. And I think it is an advantage in terms of improving the overall view, the global view of the UAE as an investment hub. I think it's just to be more compliant internationally and have sort of audited accounts and bookkeeping more on record, which will be an advantage long term for the UAE. I think obviously the sort of geopolitical issues within the region could be a potential issue. A lot of people who aren't probably familiar with the Middle East region and might not understand the ongoing conflicts that we're seeing today. But the UAE has kept a sort of yes, it's shown its support in certain way, but it has kept a neutral stance and kept foreign investment and foreign expatriates safe because that's obviously one of its priority. So these type of issues we might see in how they handle that as well. In terms of general sort of living, I mean, over the sort of 7 years I've been here, I have seen an increase in congestion, overall traffic. But again, this is sort of standard to a very heavily city where a lot of people are living. But we are seeing lots of news and articles of the government implementing new roads. So we've recently seen Sakim, which is one of the main connecting roads between Sheikh Zayed Road and Al Khail Road. There's a huge investment of 320 million dirhams investment to expand the roads to help with congestion. So yes, we're seeing all of these sort of challenges that any major economical city or emirate will have, but they are implementing all of these changes and advancements and innovations into the company to adapt and overcome these challenges and hopefully improve the overall living and investments in infrastructure of the UAE long term. I mean, the UAE has created some of the infrastructure and the buildings and the architecture we see. We've got the tallest building in the world here. So the actual sort of technology that they have and implemented is incredible to see. So I have no doubt that any challenges that the UAE might come across, they will come up with a new solution. There's new metro lines, for example. So even the sort of public transport is improving constantly. So the investment is there continuously, and we're seeing this on a daily basis in the UAE, which is a fantastic thing to see when living here as a foreign expatriate as well. That the local royal family and the sheikhs and the local governments are always looking towards how to improve the lifestyle and the quality of living for the foreign investors and the expatriates, because that is the majority of the country. 90%, 80, 90% are foreign expatriates. So they're always adapting towards accommodating for foreign expatriates, which is great.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. I mean, as you say, the UAE seems to be a little bit of a beacon in what is a pretty volatile world at the moment, and the positive changes and the development that we've seen since '71 when the UAE was founded, is unsurpassed anywhere in the world. So, for those of you who are listening in and who are interested in knowing more about how to set up a business in the UAE, or whether you're wanting to live there, or you have other interests in buying property or whatever it might be, or perhaps you have a business in another part of the world and you want to protect your business interests by setting up a company in the UAE. Well, I really hope you found this podcast of interest, and we'd like to thank you for tuning in, and please feel free to to reach out to us if you have any questions or any other points of interest that you would like to raise. Also, Calum, I'd like to really thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. And I'm sure we will be in touch with you soon as we get inquiries.